Here, welcome back to the RinkMasters podcast. My name is Tyler Kroom, and we're honored to have Jason Podollan on today. He's a former Spokane Chief and ex-NHL player. So welcome to the podcast.
Thanks very much for having me, guys.
Yeah, thank you. So, as we mentioned before, you're a former Spokane Chief. How's your experience playing with the Spokane Chiefs organization?
Spokane was kind of a little bit of a dream come true, I guess. I was listed with them from the time I was 13 years old, so I had 3 years to think about it and to plan for it and to visualize being there. I had a chance to go to Quebec, where the Memorial Cup was the year they won it. So I was there, and I was in the locker room after they won the Memorial Cup, and was kind of felt a part of that whole scenario, and I really felt a part of the organization before I even got there. So rolling in there as a 16-year-old, the Penticton Panthers, who I was playing with as a 15-year-old in the BC Junior League at the time, we were done with our season. We just got knocked out of the playoffs, so Spokane brought me up. I played the last two regular season games with them, and then I played both rounds of the playoffs. So kind of as a 15-year-old underage before my first season there. So it was awesome to get there, get the Spokane jersey on, and play in the Boone Street Barn and score some goals in front of those awesome fans.
Oh, that's awesome. What do you think was like, did it help a lot being a 13-year-old with Spokane's rights and then to come in as like a 15, 16-year-old? Did it make your transition to the WHL a lot easier for you?
Yeah, I don't know if it was easier. I think being a top prospect, I guess at that point, I was a good minor hockey league player, really, really good at that age. So, which was why I was getting attention to WHL teams at that time. So, I think it just helped me know that I was a part of their plans. I think, was the biggest thing. So from the mental side, I think it probably helped just because it wasn't, there wasn't really much question going into camp of whether I was going to make it or not. I just, I obviously had to work hard and show up and perform, but there wasn't the anxiety of that. I sort of knew that there was going to be a spot there for me, and it made me feel comfortable, I guess, a little bit earlier.
And so I'm going to, can you walk us through draft day? Not many players get that opportunity to really take part in the draft and actually get drafted by a team. You went fairly high in the second round. What was that feeling like?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've told that story before. It ended up, I mean, it sounds crazy, but it was sort of one of the worst days of my hockey journey because I was touted as high as top 5 going into the draft year. And then had some struggles. I mean, it wasn't a horrible draft year, but it wasn't great by any means. I scored 29 instead of, the 40 or 50 that I wanted. It was a bit of a struggle, but then hitting draft day, there was still a lot of people, majority of people thought I was going to be a first rounder. And then I had a conversation with Cliff Fletcher, who was the GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs the night before the draft. And he told me to my face that I was going to be a first rounder, that I was going to be going to the Leafs, that they were going to make a trade for me. They were picking 18. He told me they were going to make a trade to make sure that they were able to get my rights. And anyway, shook my hand and said, "You're going to be a Maple Leaf tomorrow." And, I have nothing bad to say about Cliff Fletcher. He's been a gentleman his whole life, and he treated me great. But I walked out of that room, obviously, with an expectation that something was going to happen. And the next day, the expectation did happen. They did trade up. They went to 10, and I think they traded down to 14 again. And then they ended up drafting Eric Fichaud with their pick. And from that point on, I just kind of, you sit in your chair and it feels like it's forever. And expectation's a funny thing, right? I mean, if a guy would have expected I was going 45 and went 31st, I would probably have been elated, right? But when you think you're going to go 10th overall and you go 31st, it feels like a punch in the guts. And yeah, so that was a bit of a tough day. I always wanted to be a first rounder. Always thought I was kind of going to be a first rounder right up to like the second before they made their pick. I thought I was going to be a first rounder, and never worked out that way. Cliff ended up coming to me on the draft floor, though, after I had the Florida jersey on, and told me that their pro scout had died of a heart attack, if you can believe that. And
wow.
And their pro scouts guy was Eric Fichaud. Obviously, in a organization like that, there's a lot of guys with different names on the board, right? So the night before, the collective agreement was that it was going to be me, and then on draft day, they decided to go, kind of with their heart, I guess, or whatever, in memory of one of their fallen comrades, for lack of a better word. And obviously, there's nothing to be, not to joke about a man's death, but it's amazing that how something like that can influence a draft day decision on the floor, when you don't know about that as an 18-year-old. But anyway, so that was a pretty wild story. It was in Hartford, and the draft's a pretty cool thing to experience, though, regardless.
Oh, that's awesome. So then going into Florida, what was your initial reaction when you arrived at Florida's camp for the first year?
Well, it was, excuse me, it was, I don't remember like anything, like they didn't have any huge names, right? Like as far as, NHL legends per se. I mean, it's not like you're on the ice with Mario Lemieux or Wayne Gretzky at camp, or some of these guys that you grew up kind of idolizing because, they were an expansion team and they were young. So by all means got my respect, and they were pros and they were all awesome. But it wasn't like a huge jaw dropping scenario. Right. So I remember the first camp actually being quite comfortable and actually performing quite well. I mean, I was one of the last guys sent home. Almost came, like, I think I was the last guy. I think I came real close to making that team as a 19-year-old. And then that was in Prince Edward Island where Roger Nielsen was from. So that was when Roger Nielsen was still coach of the team there, and they had it in PEI. Awesome experience. Excuse me. It was right on Mill River Golf Course, and we were playing golf after all the two-a-days and in between sessions, and it was a really cool experience to hang out and see that. And it just lets you know even more, right, that that's where you want to be and that's where you want to go. But yeah, there was no really there wasn't a big hit, or there wasn't this big moment. I was actually playing pretty well. I was playing pretty, having success there in camp. And for me, actually, it was more like, yeah, this is where I need to be. This is where I'm going to be at some point. I kind of felt comfortable there with those guys, and they treated me really good. The veterans, they were really awesome.
That's definitely really cool. And, so later on in your NHL career, you ended up getting traded to Toronto, which is the team that you thought you were going to get drafted by in your draft. What was that feeling when you knew that you were going to get traded to Toronto?
Well, yeah, I mean, you kind of, you tied up the loose ends there, because it was Cliff Fletcher who was still the GM there, right? So the guy that originally wanted me in 90, whatever, what was my draft year, 94, wanted me in 94, ended up getting me in 97, I guess it would be, or early part of 97. So he traded Kirk Muller, their assistant captain, for me. They were in a little different phase. Toronto was getting rid of their older players and kind of in a bit of a rebuild, and Florida was still trying to get back to the Stanley Cup final, right? So as is the case every year, and you trade some prospects for some older guys, and you hope it works out on both ends. And so Cliff, that was the deal that Cliff made, which on one hand was, that was awesome for me, right? To go to a place where they want you, right? And they want you to succeed and to perform. I mean, that there's nothing to be said for opportunity, right? You need an opportunity. Florida was giving me an opportunity. I had 19 games in the NHL at that point. But the weird part about that whole trade was that I was, at that moment, I was in the minors. So I had just come off my 21st birthday. My birthday's February 18th. So I had played actually on my birthday against my idol, Mario Lemieux, in Pittsburgh. So that was like really cool birthday present, and to experience that, and actually had a really good game that day and was feeling really good about things. And I think it was like 2 games later, I think the next game I was a healthy scratch, and that's just the way it goes sometimes. And then I think the 2 days after that, I was down in the minors. So Florida was really cool about, what they were saying. It was just, you're a part of the organization, don't worry about it. We have you as part of the plans. And so it wasn't like it was a crushing demotion at the time, but I was just down in the minors and doing what I was supposed to be doing. I was asleep in my bed, pregame nap in Greensboro, North Carolina. And that was when the trade happened. So I got woken up expecting I was going to be playing a minor hockey league game that night. And 2 hours later, I was at an airport on a plane, going to be a Toronto Maple Leaf and playing the Philadelphia Flyers the next day. So it was, I don't know. I've told that story before, but I mean, the magnitude of that at 21 years old, like it was really big, and it was a hard one to get my head around. Right. It's amazing how massively your life changes in the span of a phone call when you weren't expecting it at all in any way, shape, or form. and then to go onto that stage in Toronto and trying to, get to know teammates that you've never met before, and get to know coaching staffs in a city, and all the expectations that comes with getting traded for a assistant captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs at 21 was hard. It was hard to manage for sure, but it was exciting.
Oh, that's crazy. I mean, I guess to add on to that, what was the difference in like media attention? You're going from a organization like Florida to then going to Toronto. I mean, that's got to be crazy in itself, just looking at that.
Yeah, it was nuts. And not to point any fingers, but they didn't do a good job of prepping me for what even that was about. Like, I mean, to give you I got paged twice at whatever connecting airport I was, right? So that was back in the days of whatever. You mean, like, we didn't really have cell phones then, and internet was a little bit, I don't even know if it was on then. I can't remember, but all I know is that I'm in the airport and I'm getting paged. And it was first of all by like the Toronto Sun, and then it was by somebody else. I'm doing interviews in the airport, right? Which is already like, wow, this is kind of a big deal. They can't even wait for me to get to Toronto. And then when I got in the cab to go to my hotel, the cab driver didn't know who I was. I just got in with my hockey gear and he had no idea. But the radio show, I mean, the whole ride from the airport to my hotel was about me, right? It was like an hour and a half listening to people talk about me and whether this was like good, bad, indifferent. So that was crazy. I mean, you wouldn't hear that in the Miami radio station, right? Driving from the airport. And then the next day, we had pregame skate. Like I said, we were playing the Flyers. So we were playing the Lindros and the Legion of Doom, and we were in Maple Leaf Gardens, and it was a pregame skate. And so they have a media scrum afterwards. And I guess usually they have it in the locker room. But the media guy, their PR guy, I can't remember his name now. He's like, "Oh, we're just going to have you in the other room here." Didn't really tell me why. But he's like, we're just going to have in this other room. So anyways, open up this door, and there was like 40, 50 reporters there. And it was like, I felt like I was like the prime minister, essentially. I mean, it was like a media scrum, and I was like, microphones and cameras, and it was like really wild. So yeah, that's a good question, right? And again, as a 21-year-old who's never really been in that environment, now you're really sponging up the magnitude of what being a Toronto Maple Leaf is at that point.
No, we definitely talk about how wild it is. As a younger player, how did you think you handled the media attention once you got to Toronto?
Well, I don't know. I wish I did a better job of focusing what I needed to do on the ice. There's so many balls in the air there. Meaning, like I said, trying to establish relationships with the team. I wasn't an established NHLer at that point. So, I was trying to prove that status, right? To try and be an NHLer, a full-time NHLer. I wasn't around the league enough to know these players that were on that team. So, and there wasn't any guys from the WHL. So it was a really foreign locker room to me. And it's hard when you're on a team and you don't feel like you fit in, right? So that was maybe where a lot of my direction went, was like to try and figure out relationships within this team and to try and get to know some of these guys. As well as with the coaching staff. I mean, they had no idea who I was. I didn't have any idea who they were. Figuring out where to go eat, how to do all these other things, in that city was challenging. And so you get kind of caught up in a lot of things that maybe aren't what you're doing on the ice. Just this year, I've actually watched a couple of the games where I played, and I actually played better than I remember myself playing, but there's still is, like, I wish there was more I could have done there, right? That was my big audition. I had 10 games there. I was playing on some good lines. I mean, I had Sundin and Clark. I remember one game where I was right wing with them. I was getting some power play time, and I had some opportunities. The puck wasn't going in the net. I mean, that's just the way it goes sometimes too. Like you can't make that thing be different. But I could have had a little bit more. I don't know what the right word is. Like, I could have given a shit a little less about mistakes, and just like, let's go get this thing right. I was worried about not making mistakes. I mean, part of that had to do with a little bit with Mike Murphy. I mean, he was trying to tell me to play better defense, and I think I'm too coachable sometimes. So if you tell me to play better defense, I'm going to be on the defensive side of everything. You know, and when you're on the defensive side of everything, you're probably not going to score many goals or, you know, make a difference that way, or make a big hit on the forecheck or whatever. So I kind of got caught in between trying to be the player that I could be and the player that I thought they wanted me to be. Anytime you have indecision like that as a hockey player, you're not going to be at your absolute best. So, yeah, so that was the thing. I mean, I had the 10 games. I thought I played well, and I did play well. I didn't play great though, right? So the thing was, when I didn't play great, now they had the opportunity to send me to St. John's. So there was a few of us that were there at the time. They sent us to St. John's for the playoff run because the Leafs never made the playoffs. So now that's my fourth team in like one season at my first year pro, right? A whole nother group of new guys, a whole nother like geographic region, a whole nother like world, essentially trying to fit in there. Like that was, I mean, that's a challenge. Every time it's a challenge. And then you're supposed to go and you're just supposed to be able to play and perform. So that first initial audition maybe wasn't awesome. And then I had the issue of like Cliff Fletcher getting fired that summer. So then Cliff Fletcher gets fired, and Mike Smith came in, who, you know, and every GM wants to put their own kind of stamp on it. And at that stage, I hadn't solidified my spot well enough, you know, like I was still a guy that needed to audition, and I was an easy guy to kind of get left off the roster, even though I did come to camp in amazing shape. Like I got second overall in the, out of everybody, 45 guys at camp, you know, was given an award, and, you know, had a really good camp, and just, but there was never an opportunity there. Like they didn't give me an exhibition game that year, which was super odd. So that was like a Mike, that, I mean, looking back on it now at 44, I think that was a Mike Smith thing, but you know, that's hockey. You know, it's just the way it goes sometimes. I started out really well in the minors too, a couple hat tricks my first couple of games, and just never got a sniff after Mike Smith came in really there. So yeah, it's like one of those things. What do? You don't know when your opportunity necessarily is going to be, or how many you're going to get, and you got to try and make the most of it when you get them.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, mentioned that you were like sometimes too coachable. So that's a good segue into so our questions about your coaching and play development. Do you think your ability to be coachable and your burning passion for the game has really helped you become, you know, a good coach, and especially for youth hockey?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was always I think I was a little bit ahead of my time as far as like what my personality was like. And now the players they're able to ask why, and the coaches are ready to tell them why, you know, when you're told to do something. I've always been a why guy, you know, I've always been a critical thinker and always wanting to understand, you know, why I'm doing something, or maybe how I can do it better. And with those kinds of thoughts comes questions, right? I was from the era where you weren't really supposed to ask,
right?
You know, or if you did, it was looked upon as who knows what it was looked on, maybe arrogance. I mean, I don't know, whatever the case may be, right? So that wasn't a great spot for me, because then if I didn't know why, you're in that kind of not confusion, but you know, you're uncertainty, and when you're uncertain, then you're not sharp, right? You're not responding. And so to bring that forward, yeah, I mean, I like to have players be as layered as they can with the reasons why we're getting them to do things. You know, everyone's different. Some guys are just jump and they'll say how high, and some guys want to know why, and you know, which way's the wind blowing and everything else. And you want to give everyone the most opportunity to be the best player that they can. And I think that's one of the things that I learned from being a player, is that, you know, in our day, you were left a lot on your own to figure it out, you know, and there's an accountability there that I still think is massively valuable. The responsibility of being accountable and figuring out your own game, you know, being consciously competent with how you play your best, and to be able to show up regardless of who's holding your hand or not. But I just think we're better with people, right? So if you can get somebody that's been there before, or somebody that you really feel is in your corner and wants you to be your best, and you trust them, like there's power there, right? There's more power in 2 or 3 or 4 than there is in 1. And that's just what I'm trying to do now, is really give these guys you know, a tool, a role model, a mentor, a coach, whatever name you want to put on it, to have them to believe in something, and to have them you know, have a way to dive in and really explore their personal greatness, which is a really fun subject for me to want to get involved in.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. With coaching your youth, what do you think are some of like the core values you hold for those players and stuff that you like value the most when they're on and off the ice?
That's a great question. I mean, it tees up exactly what I like to talk about, which is, character is one of my foundational pieces, and character is a word that I love to ask all my guests on my podcast there at my hockey is, you get guys like David Quinn on, or, Jared Bednar, or, guy Stacey Roos, assistant general manager of the, Tampa Bay Lightning, and you ask them, I mean, what does character mean to you, and how important is it in your organization? And guys will have somewhat different answers, but it's always at a really high point on the totem pole for like how they value it. And I believe that we can develop our character, and I believe that we can develop these characteristics and these life skills that make us better hockey players. And I think that's the biggest thing where I differentiate right now is in the marketplace, is that one, I know that the headspace, your mindset matters an absolute ton, regardless of how good of a skater you are, or how hard you shoot the puck, or what your puck skills are like. You need to be able to handle adversity. You need to know how to handle relationships. You need to know how to handle people. And you need to know how to practice properly and take care of yourself. And a lot of those come from this like character foundation, a belief system, even of like why you're doing what you're doing. We've been talking about reasons, right? When you have more reasons as a hockey player to understand why you're in the garage shooting pucks, or why you got to show up early and be helpful to a teammate, or why there's these things that you have to do, you become more valuable to an organization, and you become a better asset for somebody else, and you become a better individual hockey player. So yeah, I go into great depths on those types of traits and those types of subjects. And I don't think I know, like, this is a massively valuable thing. And when you can actually dig your teeth into character and all those things and mindset, you are separating yourself from the competition, because no one else is treating it like a skill. We're treating it like it's either like, oh, it's this nice thing to have, and I'm going to be a good guy, and I'm going to go work on we're going to go working with the super deker here again and get better hands, right? But it's like, it's not like that. I mean, we can actually develop as people. And when you are recognized as your coach, or within a place that you're playing as being one of those guys, those are the guys that go. Those are the guys that get separated. Those are guys that when the phone call gets answered, it's like their name that comes up. And as we all know, the tighter the funnel gets, where you want to get to, every advantage you have as a hockey player matters, because everyone gets really good real fast.
I really like that answer, because, I remember from my experience playing minor hockey growing up, my favorite coach had a very similar mindset as you. Every time he came to the rink, he was expecting us to really just be coachable, and to come in and like just really have a sense of character. When we show up to the rink, we're to conduct ourselves as if we were like pros, in a sense, right? Like honor each other, respect each other. And it was amazing to see how much that influence really progressed. I mean, us as kids, we were 12 and 13, right? So by the end of that year, I felt like I grew a significant amount, not just as a player, but also as a young man,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good for him. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I think team sports in particular, they teach you a lot of things, almost just by their nature, right? Like, just being involved in it, you can definitely learn some things about accountability and teamwork and selflessness and responsibility and all those great words, those great meaty words. But when you have a coach or someone involved in it that now emphasizes those things and like makes it part of the practice plan, almost, like, I believe that's invaluable, as you just said. I mean, you remember that year specifically because you know what? You became a better hockey player, I'm sure, but you became a better person, and your perspective changed on how you operated in the world, right? And when we can change that, like what our belief system is, how we show up on a day-to-day basis, like that stays, that makes a difference. And that's going to help you with whatever you're going to do, and I think that's the power of sports. It's the power of coaching. That's the power of mentorship. Being around an environment that is conducive to high performance can make all the difference in the world.
Yeah, that's really big when you're developing and stuff. As we kind of wrap things up, you played in the World Juniors in 1996. You played with some great players, one of them being my favorite, Joe McGinley. What kind of stories do you have, being in the World Juniors in 96, and what was your kind of experience like?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was one of the best ever, really, right? You talk to And I do that on my podcast too. I mean, you talk to these guys that have had long tenured pro careers, and if they haven't won a Stanley Cup, like the thing that they'll say, if they won a World Junior Championship, especially for Canada, is like that's the highlight of their career. Like it's nothing to do with being a pro athlete, right? It's like, you know, like winning that World Junior gold was huge. And so obviously for me, somebody with 45 NHL games or 41 or whatever the heck I ended up with, you know, that's like one of the pinnacles for me. You know, was being selected to that team is definitely something that TSN did and still does an amazing job. Keeping that a part of, you know, your New Year's, Christmas culture, right? You watch that as a young athlete and you're cheering for these players, and then to wear the Canadian maple leaf is a dream come true. And then to be on a team that was successful was also amazing. You know, it was the first year that it went to the current format. So back in the day, and you guys might be too young to even remember that or know that, but it was a round robin format. So you just played every team once, and kind of no rhyme or reason. You could play the Russians the first game or the last game, and you know, and your record at the end dictated what color medal you were wearing. But our year was the first year I went to the semifinal final format, or quarterfinal, semifinal, final, and so we had a do or die game against the Russians in the semifinal. Where that was sort of my big coming out party. I was having a pretty good tournament, but not great. But then I scored 2 goals that game, and I think it was a 4-1 win or something, and kind of, you know, got us into the gold, which was super cool. And then we played Sweden in the final, and Jerome had kind of this epic play that was pretty cool on the forecheck. He just blew up this Swedish D-man and manhandled the puck and got it out front. He had another good goal. Like it was his, like that was his tournament. That was where it was like, okay, this guy's for real. You know, like he was a high draft pick, but that was where he came in and really established himself as a, you know, as a premier player on a world stage. That was where I think Calgary sort of knew what they'd gotten, because that trade had already happened from Dallas to Calgary, and he was Calgary property at that point. And he really had a fantastic tournament and did a great job for us in that tournament to help us win the gold. But we had, like I said, we had a Hart Trophy winner and Jose Theodore as our goalie. You know, Rhett Warner was on there, another Flame that you guys had for a while. We had Curtis Brown, who was up for some Selke awards there for a while. We had Damon Lankow, longtime Flame as well. Yeah. Nolan Baumgartner was there. Chris Phillips was on that team. Denny Gauthier. Anyways, I mean, the list goes on, like not maybe NHL Hall of Famers like Jerome, but like still good, solid NHL players, you know, that went on to really good careers. And yeah, it was fun. I mean, that's something that I got the stick outside my door right now, right? And with the gold medal, and it's just something that you'll never take away from any one of us.
Absolutely. No, it's crazy. You know, mentioning talk about Jerome McGinley, you know, it's just got carried over. And when he got into the Olympics and then for Canada 2010, you know, a lot of people, they like to talk about, you know, Crosby's goal, which is fantastic, but Jerome had set up that entire play. And I just remember, like, I think that's one play that hasn't left my brain, is just that beautiful pass by Jerome that just made that whole thing possible. And, you know, I just love watching the international games. They're amazing.
Yeah. He was an amazing interview. I don't know if you guys had a chance to listen to it, but I had 90 minutes with Jerome, and you know, he's all class. He's a gentleman. He's just a top shelf, just human being. And having a chance to talk with him and to reconnect, you know, we battled for 3 years in juniors, and then we were able to play on that team together. So we definitely had a history, but it was nice to reconnect with him. And discuss all those things. Well, actually, I didn't discuss the gold medal game just because that's not really the nature of my interviews. We sort of got into more of the, you know, whatever, the preparation, character, you know, teammate leadership type discussion. But yeah, I mean, that I've heard him talk about that goal before, and he made that pass to an area, to a voice. He didn't know where Sidney was, and he just heard Sidney that really wanted the puck, and he says, "I better get this puck to him," and obviously he did, and you know, it's a part of Canadian lore, hockey lore for forever now.
Yeah, definitely. Looks like we're coming in on the end time for this interview. So yeah, no, thank you for coming on, and you know, we definitely would love to have you on again in the future. And for our listeners, we recommend that you go follow Jason at Up My Hockey is definitely a great podcast. There's a lot of really good content there, a lot of good interviews. My personal favorite was the Chris Osgood interview. Being able to hear from a goalie that played for such an iconic franchise and some really good Stanley Cup runs, definitely.
Yeah, cool. No, thanks for having me on, guys. Yeah, I mean, Up My Hockey is where you find me. That's the podcast. That's what I do too. Anyone listening out there who has, high performance teams, I work with teams on this kind of stuff. I work with players individually. So by all means, you can reach out there if this is something that interests you.
Awesome. All right. Well, have a great day, Jason. Thanks for coming
on. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. And that was our interview with Jason Podollan. Chris, what are some of your takeaways from that a very, very insightful interview?
Yeah, there's a lot we discussed. It was probably the most enjoyable interview I've ever done with a guy. He's a class act. Does things the right way. I think one of the biggest things I took away with it was how he values his players. I think doesn't necessarily value it all by on the ice skill. I mean, that obviously takes some compatibility about your game, but there's another 50% of it. That's like the character and stuff. And he really touched on that. And guys with good character and guys that are willing to work and ask the questions and all that are going to get the opportunities. Those are the guys that coaches are going to be talking about. The leaders in the room, the guys who respect you, all that stuff. I think that really makes a big difference, and that'll open the door regardless of your skill set. So I think that was one of the biggest things I took away with it for sure, besides the big noise about getting moved to Toronto and stuff.
Absolutely. And I know, Chris, we talked about this earlier, how the percentage of players that actually make it to the NHL, it's 0.1%. Like it's not a big number. And then you even minimize that number even more, and those are to significant less amount of players that actually end up having really long standing memorable NHL careers. And so I think a lot of people, and I think this is my biggest takeaway from hockey parents now, is there's a lot of focus on trying to develop, a pro hockey player. And I think, parents are spending way too much money, putting way too much effort in the wrong, aspects of player development. So I really like how Jason brought up that it's about character. It's about building up these kids off the ice as well as on the ice, and making sure that, they're learning these abilities and these, traits that will not just help them in hockey, but in other areas of their lives as they grow up. And I think that's really important to know, because I think again, more hockey parents should tune into Jason Podollan's podcast, because I really feel like we need to hockey parents need to change their approach to the to hockey, especially youth hockey. It's about team building, it's about building up characteristics, and it's about just enjoying the game. Let's not ruin the passion that these kids have for the sport by riding them too hard to succeed and with unrealistic expectations.
Yeah, definitely. I think one more thing I want to touch on. I think we look at it, being Canadians and stuff, but just looking as NHL fans in general, we look at Toronto and we look at that's the big media center. We sometimes call TSN the Toronto Sports Network. And for great reason. I think Jason brought up a really good point about, I asked about the media, coming from Florida to Toronto, and just like how they didn't prepare them and all that stuff. Like that's tough coming in there as like a 20, 21-year-old kid who really hasn't experienced that before. I'm that age right now, and like that would be extremely like mind blowing to me. And having 40, 50 media guys coming out there for like your first time, you're about to play the Flyers, Eric Lindros, those guys, that's crazy. And I think that really takes a toll on you, especially if you're not, mentally ready for that and aren't prepared for that. So I think that's why like the whole character thing comes into play again, because if you got good character and you're well prepared mentally for that stuff, I think that will just allow your game to grow more than if not, for sure.
Absolutely. And that approach to to the game, it's gives you more of a sober mind heading into it. I think you have a better chance at really reaching the fullest potential when you understand the gravity of your situation, right? If you go into it not expecting to be a professional hockey player, just to have fun and enjoy it, I think you're going to take way more away from the program and everything, as opposed to if you went into it thinking you're going to be the next Connor McDavid or a Wayne Gretzky.
Hmm. Especially when you're traded, for a high profile guy like Kirk Muller. I mean, the expectations are there, and it's definitely tough. So I think that's one thing you can take away from it is if you're really ready off the ice, your necessary skill set isn't the biggest thing. And if you can put what you have off the ice with confidence and stuff going in, I think you have a really good shot at doing well.
Absolutely. And I think, it's crazy too to think that, like, when he brought up that, the GM that wanted to draft him, they didn't draft him, but then traded for him. When he got fired, that completely changed the trajectory of his, future in Toronto. So I think that was an interesting thing. I think, that just kind of shows that there's a lot of different variables at play when it comes to, making it into the pros. It's sometimes, like, you're going to be in one general manager's, plans for the future. And then, that can change with the drop of a hat. And I think that was really something I didn't really think about. So it's really interesting to hear about that.
Yeah, no, he brought up a really good point because I didn't personally know that. He's going through talking about, I believe his name was Cliff Fletcher, the GM of the Leafs at that time. And, he clearly wanted Jason since draft day. They had those conversations and draft day and stuff. He obviously didn't end up going to the Leafs right away. But then to get traded, Fletcher to trade for him coming into that next season, I mean, that says a lot to know that you're wanted by that GM and wanted by that team, and you're going to fit into those plans. I think it gives you a lot of confidence because, like you said, he played really well in that 10-game audition with the Leafs, playing with guys like Sundin and Wendell Clark and stuff. Those are household names. So clearly they thought highly of him playing with those guys. And then for that GM to get switched out and to bring a new GM in who I guess Jason didn't fit that, what the new GM wanted to do. So I think that really kind of throws a wrench into things and makes it more tough for you knowing that, getting scratched and stuff and just not getting the opportunity is really tough.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, and just, one of the biggest takeaways I also have as well, like in the grand scheme of this whole interview, just how well thought out the responses were. And I feel like we definitely learned a lot from this interview. And I think that's, for me, that was the biggest goal with this podcast, was bringing guys like Jason on and being able to just, hear from guys that have been in this field for so long, that you have great insight into what goes on to becoming an NHLer, becoming, a very highly respected, name in hockey, and in their communities as well. I think that, this was definitely, I definitely really love this interview for sure.
Yeah, no, it was one of my favorite interviews I've ever done with someone, class act guy, super well spoken, nothing bad I could say about him. So, yeah.
Yeah, I know that was definitely really good. And with that, this concludes our our podcast. I hope that you guys will please subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and we'll see you next week.